Good evening, and thank you for coming to this panel discussion that we titled "I Would Not Be Your Comrade If I Didn't Tell You This." I just need to tell you that this event is being recorded and also live streamed. So just to have this in mind. This panel discussion is actually part of the project that Boško and I, as a doppelganger artist duo, developed and also submitted to the WIENWOCHE festival. The project is called Laboratory for Anti-Imperial Solidarity, and it consists of few events, few activities. One of the activities is actually this discussion, but beside it's also exhibition that can be seen at Wien Museum Muza Gallery until 21st September. Laboratory for Anti-Imperial Solidarity actually departs from historical events, mainly Vlachian uprising in 1935, but also it connects with environmental struggles in the European Union, especially peripheries of European Union, and also in the context of European Union Critical Raw Materials Acts. We wanted to develop certain activities that would question these notions, let's say, but also connect the processes that European Union peripheries actually are going through, but also going through the similar processes that actually global majority has been going through for decades and even centuries. Through the project, we actually wanted to make a kind of, beside raising these questions about similar historical but also contemporary experiences, we also wanted to build a platform for envisioning a global society as free of colonial and imperial structures. So, as I said, these discussions are a way to contextualize all these questions, but also to help us in a way connecting these questions and making connections between ourselves. So today with us on this panel are Goran Musić, Lina Džuverović, and Petra Matić. I will just introduce them, and then we will open a discussion about questions that are very connected actually with the very title of this discussion. I forgot to tell that if you have any questions or comments, you can place them in a chat. We will collect them, and then at the end we will also read and discuss, but there will be an open floor at the end as well. So if you want to participate, just raise this Zoom hand, and we will open the mic. So yes, Goran Musić who is with us, is a social historian of labor in East Central and Southeast Europe, approaching the field from a broader disciplinary background in global history, nationalism studies, and political economy. After earning a PhD degree in history and civilization from the European University Institute, he held position at the University of Graz, Central European University, and the University of Vienna, where he researched, published, and taught on theoretical and methodological aspects of global labor history, 20th century revolutions, social transformations in post-socialism, workplace democracy, global value chains, and East-South exchanges during the Cold War. He is the author of Making and Breaking the Yugoslav Working Class, a story of two self-managed factories, CU Press, which tells the story of industrial labor in socialist Yugoslavia, looking into the alternate ways in which the blue-collar workers understood the recurring cycles of crisis and reforms of worker self-management, the changing nature of the relationship between different occupational groups inside the factories, as well as the interplay between class and national identities. Lina Džuverović. Dr. Lina Džuverović is a curator and researcher of Yugoslav Sudanese origin based in London. She has been leading the master's program in curating and collections at Chelsea College of Art, University of London since September 2023. In her research, she focuses on questions of collectivity and gendered labor, and her curatorial practice approaches contemporary art as a sphere of solidarity and community building. Lina was the recipient of Bard College Center of the Arts and Human Rights Faculty Fellowship in 2022 for the research project entitled And Others, the Gendered Politics and Practices of Art Collectives. Previously, Lina was the artistic director of the Calvert 22 Foundation in London, founder and director of the contemporary art agency Electra, London, curator of media arts at the ICA London, and co-curator of the Momentum Biennale 2009 in Norway, and has taught contemporary art at universities Great Britain and Austria exhibitions. Monuments should not be trusted, nothing in contemporary 2016, Sanja Veković, Unknown Heroine, South London Gallery, Calvert 2012, Fifth Nordic Contemporary Art Biennale, Norway 2009, Her Noise, South London Gallery, and other spaces. In 2006, Lina was the recipient of Arts Council England Decibel Curatorial Fellowship worth £50,000, which at the time was the largest amount awarded to a curator in the UK. And Petra Matić, who is an artist, curator, and activist focused on cultural transformation, social justice, and anti-colonial practices. She recently developed the Non-Aligned Archive, a digital archive preserving the histories of African, Asian, and American diasporas in Croatia. Petra was worked with Museum of Contemporary Art Zagreb on La Internacional's Museum of the Commons project and exhibited at the Documenta 15, Photograph Festival Prague, and the Ljubljana Design Biennale. Petra is the founder of the Jutro NGO and an advocate for integrating contemporary art with human rights. She is a member of the Croatian Association of Interdisciplinary Artists, fellow of Goethe Institute Global Cultural Relations, and participated in residencies like the Delfina Foundation, Good School, HKW, and IMA. Petra has curated projects for major Croatian institutions and contributed to spaces like Linira Refugee Camp in France. So, this discussion was actually designed in order to question, but also see potentials of non-aligned movement that was actually established in 61 in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, on the establishing conference, in order to see what are the potentials and what are the possibilities of the infrastructures, but also methodologies of non-aligned movement that we today could maybe use in the global struggles of liberations that many societies actually face. The movement originated in the aftermath of Korean War, but actually was very much incited by the bloc division between the Soviet bloc and Soviet socialist bloc, and a pro-American capitalist group of countries that where many of which actually belonged to NATO. So in 61, a non-aligned movement it was established at the conference, but also it followed these principles that was previously agreed at the Bandung conference in 1955, and in Belgrade, actually through initiate of Yugoslav president, it hosted Indian Prime Minister Nehru, Ghanaian President Kwame Nkrumah, Indonesian President Sukarno, and United Arab Republic President Nasser. So after that, these conferences and also establishing a connection between these countries continued and grow into building certain infrastructures of solidarity. Mostly it was popular or very much important in the 50s and 60s, and continued almost until 1991 in order to say having the influence in the world's politics and policies. The major success of non-aligned movement was actually in supporting decolonization, opposition to racism, but also opposition to apartheid in South Africa. And all these values continued during entire Cold War, and despite many conflicts that actually in that period history faced. We were interested. The non-aligned movement actually represented 2/3 of the United Nations member countries, which was 56. We found the data of the world population. So those membership particularly concentrated in the countries considered to be developing countries, and they were very much facing the actually countries of the global south. So in a way we can say, and this was the base for this discussion, that in the 60s, non-aligned movement was major disruptor of the political, economic, and cultural status quo. Within its newly independent nations from across the global majority, it sought to generate channels and protocols for international collaboration that would bypass centuries-old colonial, extractive, and imperial dynamics. So today, legacies of non-aligned movement are present in radical thinking, but we actually wanted to see what what we can do with the knowledge of non-aligned movement and today, and how we can use this heritage in supporting actually the struggles we are facing. This team, I needed to give this introduction about the non-aligned movement because it is very much alive among academia, activists, and some of the artist practices. But for general public, it's still very, very much unknown and not very present. So my first question to the panelists would actually be regarding that we are in this moment of history that we could say that we are facing again certain block division, only maybe just in the outlines. What would be and why do you think that this team is very much erased from the knowledge and the let's say general history and general cultural notions, let's say general culture? So Lina, maybe we can start from you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be part of this conversation. Why is the non-aligned movement erased? I think rather than being erased, I would say, and I'm speaking very much from a British perspective, having lived in London most of my adult life, I don't think it was, for example, ever taught in schools. I don't think it was ever part of a history curriculum. I don't think it's part of what would be considered some kind of general knowledge. So, and I was not sure when I started working with the archive that I am the custodian for, which I'll talk about. I wasn't sure how much people knew. And then through working with my students for a couple of years now, I've realized that really the knowledge is a lot less, and there just isn't that much knowledge about the non-aligned movement. It's definitely a niche interest, I would say, here, as you said, in very specific circles, but not even, I wouldn't even say so much in the cultural circles. I think in a very specific part of contemporary art or the kind of cultural sphere, very specific, very niche. And there's really interesting work being done. But in my experience, just as an anecdote, I've worked now with maybe I don't know, over 100 students on with the archive, and out of them, one had heard of the non-aligned movement, and that's because she used to live in Belgrade. So that tells you something. So and the reasons I think are probably obvious. I mean, we're at the heart of empire. And at the heart of empire, we would not be seeing school books that are going to be teaching children or young people about an alternative or forms of resistance. So I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you. Yeah, so regarding this, I always had this impression that it's widely known in the ex-Yugoslav context. And when I start talking about outside, it's really, as you said, only like a certain niche or certain professions would know. But I don't know if that also is a situation with today's region of ex-Yugoslavia. So maybe Petra can share her experience since Croatia, as Serbia and other ex-republics, we were part of Yugoslavia, where this knowledge was in a way nurtured. but I have the impression that today it's actually a different situation with new generation, but also with within this new, or let's say, a different political context.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. Yeah, like I'm part of generation that was brought up during Croatia building the national state, learning a completely different language, and in the aftermath of what I can quote the first Croatian president, Franjo Tuđman, who said, "There will be no red, yellow, or green devils in Croatia," which meant that the history of the non-aligned movement was erased deliberately. The International Student Friendship Club, which had its headquarters in Zagreb, same as in many university towns all over Yugoslavia, was evicted. All of the archive was taken away to never be seen again, and later the building was burnt. Same goes for the events that were done by the African Student Union in Zagreb. The posters were found with a printed false date, and they were torn down on the ground. So, from a Croatian perspective, non-aligned movement is something that you hear about, but it doesn't really mean anything. And it's kind of, in my experience, after working with these histories for 6 years, it's kind of like an archaeology where if you remove the first layer, you can find many, many things. But on the level 0, there is actually nothing.
Yeah. Thank you. The same question is also for Goran, but your experience is a little bit different because you share the knowledge of a non-aligned movement that was part of our upbringing in Yugoslavia, but also this like working outside outside of it while on the subject. What would you say? Why is not? Why is this not known?
Yes, well, first of all, it's great to be with you today. I would say similar to Petra, coming from a Yugoslav background. I was born and raised in Belgrade, in Serbia. There was definitely a turn away from the whole experience of solidarity with developing countries and non-aligned movement. It historically looking, I was a kid back then, but as a historian, you can clearly see traces of this already in the late 1980s when Europe becomes a highly potent new orientation for many Eastern European countries, and former Yugoslav republics are no exceptions. So there is this notion of a return to Europe, of state socialist regimes somehow keeping these societies artificially separated from their natural habitat of orienting towards Europe. There is a growth of skeptical, ranging from skeptical to outward racist speech, discourses, and images of Africa and Asia. The first thing that comes to my mind, something, that, I remember as a kid growing up, is this song from Riblja Čorba when he talks about Africans as, cannibals, as friends of a gangster, meaning Tito, and so on. So there was this entire period of time, starting from late 80s, I would say, until a couple of years ago, where non-alignment was erased in the official discourses. But I would argue that it continued being present in a kind of more intimate personal memories of people in former Yugoslavia. As you mentioned, I personally have connections to the non-aligned movement through my family experience. They were employed in self-managed companies which worked abroad in the global south, in Iraq. I spent 2 years there in mid-80s as a very small child. And through my family, through broader milieus of other family friends, there was always a kind of remembrance and recall of those years. As I said, I was born and raised in Belgrade. There is absolutely a bias towards the more kind of middle class professional layers, engineers, architects, people who worked in these successful, large Yugoslav companies. But I would argue, and this is confirmed through my field work in Yugoslavia in the last couple of years, even in smaller places and in lower social classes, less educated manual workers and so on, there is lived experience and an idea of this non-aligned connection. Companies have also sent, cooks, manual workers abroad. Many people have spent either a year or two abroad. Many people met foreign students who were in Yugoslavia. So this heritage lives on despite erasure from the top, I would say, definitely.
Okay, hello from my side as well. I will ask other questions to start another circle. So the second circle would be just actually continuation of what you Goran mentioned just right now. Actually, maybe you can also start. We would start to talk about actually the archives you all have insight in, and you worked with, and you are attached to them, and in different ways, and somehow it's speculative, of course. Every one of you, in a way, have a different approach to the archive, and we just, like I said, in purpose of the talk, divided in academic, artistic, and activistic, but it doesn't have to be like that, of course, because everything is merged and intersected. So maybe Goran, because you actually have a project that is also very academia project, and have a approach to the state archives, basically, or the institutional archives. I'll just read a little bit about it, so you can develop it how as far as you want. So this is actually the theme of your research project for several years already. Socialist workplace in post-colonial Africa, a connected history of the Yugoslav workforce in Zambia. So this is a study of Yugoslav companies, workforces in Zambia, explores everyday dimension of Yugoslavia, links with post-colonial African societies, and it connects class, labor, and race into studies of Yugoslav regions, ambiguous relationship to the global south through the lens of his social history, which you already mentioned. And this process, this project advances knowledge about Yugoslavia's socialist globalization and the Yugoslav working class through this example of two Yugoslav companies in Zambia. It's an Energo project and FAP, one of Yugoslav's main African partners. The research seeks to reveal the effects of operation in the global south Yugoslav workers' relationship to the self-management system and its values. So it's something very specific, which you deal with also longer period of research of your work, as well as how Zambian actors perceive their connections with Yugoslavia. So you can tell us about your actually, let's say, the idea to start. You mentioned that you have also personal attached or motives for research, but also there is something specific which you already did in your previous research and considering self-management. But you can open also this question about the archive, institutional archives, and what is actually the position of the project and how it actually, what is the state and what is your first impression, whatever you want to say. We can further after continue.
Yeah, I would just like to add, because this idea of knowledge and sharing knowledge about the non-aligned movement is actually, since we think and we just realized has been erased or has been suppressed or not enough articulated. What we've been realizing, also working with the archive, is that archives are now that pool of the knowledge that's been hidden, but there is various archives, and constituting of an archive is also process. And the reason of inviting you, because of in a way you had dealt with three let's say formats, archival formats, that we would actually like to hear more and share, especially in order to question possibilities of further knowledge sharing about the non-aligned movement. So yeah, Goran, maybe you can continue.
Sure. So, I mean, the first challenge that any historian who tries to approach the non-aligned movement faces is that this movement had very few fixed supranational bodies standing in between these meetings or summits. So therefore, it is notoriously hard to research it as a whole. Of course, one can look at the declarations from various summits, the official documents, but they are compiled as a kind of a common denominator, framed in very often vague diplomatic formulations. So, in order to enter the non-aligned movement, one has no other choice, if one wants to look at the institutional level, but to enter it through a national archive of a member state, right? And then one must be careful and see what time frame are we talking about and what was the agenda of different notable member states, such as, Algeria, Cuba, Yugoslavia, what they aim to achieve at a certain point with the non-aligned movement, and how they manage to gather consensus among other member states, right? This is a context, I think, which is really important to keep in mind. I have researched Yugoslavia and Yugoslavia-Zambian relations through three national archives. The first one is obviously the Yugoslav archives, the Yugoslav Diplomatic Archive, Archive Yugoslavia, the Archive of Yugoslavia. I also spent a month in Lusaka in Zambia, working with Zambia National Archives, and additionally, I was curious to see how did the former imperial power, Great Britain, look at these non-aligned relations. So I've also spent some time in British National Archive in London, looking at documents of how did the British diplomacy look at Yugoslav's involvement in Zambia. And let's start from maybe the last one and connecting to what Lina was stating in the beginning. I mean, one is really, I would say, if one is not part of a former imperial society, one is really struck by the tone and the way that official British diplomats are talking about Zambia, Africa, non-aligned in general. There is definitely a sense of arrogance, of belittling of these attempts, Even outward racist connotations in official documents. So, there are also many very critical research about Yugoslavs, about Yugoslav diplomacy, about their blindness to race, to questions of race, to their perception of whiteness, and so on. And this is very important research. However, I think it is important for each of these researches to be contextualized really within the post-colonial framework, because if they're put in this or compared to former colonial discourses, only then you get an idea of why Yugoslavia was often the country, the partner of choice for many African and Asian countries. When it comes to Yugoslav sources, they are abundant if one wants to look at non-alignment through official state institutions. However, there are clear limits to voices one can encounter through them, and to the kind of range of topics that they are interested in. So they are mostly interested in very kind of bread and butter, concrete things such as diplomatic influence, the flow of money, a geopolitical situation, advancement of decolonization in kind of military terms. If one wants to research non-alignment from a more bottom-up perspective, then I think one has to be creative and go to different types of sources. So the go-to source is definitely oral history, and I will not go much into it because I'm sure Petra will have a lot to say about this. My go-to source, which I've inherited from my previous research of self-management inside Yugoslavia, are enterprise papers. So I was and still am very focused on the publications that these self-managed companies which went abroad published, and the way that they narrated, published reports about their operations abroad. And you can really kind of then also kind of reading against the grain, of course, looking at what they only mention in the passing, what they acknowledge is there but don't really emphasize on. Also focusing on things such as caricatures, comics in these newsletters. One can gain a kind of a more comprehensive bottom-up idea of the Yugoslav presence in the global South. And also another thing which I would just like to note is that there are these go-to companies which usually come to mind, such as Energoprojekt in the case of Serbia, Energo Invest from Sarajevo, Pelagonia from Macedonia, Rade Končar from Croatia, and so on. What I've done in previous months is try to go level down and look at the subcontractors of these companies, because each one of these companies contracted, let's say, less successful companies to do parts of these large infrastructural projects. And these companies were, maybe less better off financially, they had less skilled workforce, their knowledge of language was not that proficient. So you get a kind of a different insight into the whole Yugoslav experience abroad. This is one of the ways that I, for instance, approach it and attempt to see it through the lens of class, gender, labor relations on the ground, and so on. And last but not least, the Zambian perspective. Again, I was in Zambia working there for only a month, so my knowledge of knowledge production in Zambia and the way it is at the moment is very limited. What I can say is that there was a similar juncture in interest and erasure, I would say, of this experience, of this memory in Zambia, and I know this applies to many other African countries, similar one to Eastern Europe and to Yugoslavia. So 1991 is a crucial kind of a watershed year where many of these older non-aligned oriented regimes fall. And there is a kind of a pushback, again, a kind of a othering of Yugoslavia as this quote unquote unnatural ally of these countries, right? Countries which were always oriented to maybe Commonwealth or Francophone spheres of influence. So there is a kind of a bewilderment. Why would we try to reinvent the wheel and try to collaborate with this peripheral or semi-peripheral European country where we can go to a much more established channels of well-off, developed countries and establish contact with them. So there is this rupture there as well. And one has to find ways to go above this or beneath it.
Thank you, Goran. I will continue with Lina, if she can also elaborate her position, since she inherited a private archive of her aunt, who was Olja Džuverović, and she was a diplomat and activist working for Commission for Assistance in of the Liberation Movement at the Socialist Alliance of the Working People of Yugoslavia, which was SSRNY, which is very in Serbo-Croatian, in 70s and 80s and later. And of course, working there in a lot of countries, being very active, very politically active, and specifically in the period of decolonization of Southern African countries like Namibia and South Africa, but also Tanzania and Angola, Zimbabwe as well. So since this archive is specific, and probably your position as a relative also is very specific, and also it would be interesting to hear your approach to this kind of archive, since it's maybe not typically historical, and also consider this feminist and personal approach. So probably would like to hear this approach to the archive. What is the problems and what are the challenges for you, but also how you actually develop it and how you decided to use it in a way as a knowledge production.
Sure, thank you. That's a really good introduction to the situation I find myself in relation to this archive. So the archive, as Boško said, is a collection of materials that were left in our home in Belgrade by my aunt, who was, as Boško said, diplomat, but also very much a grassroots activist from her student days. So this spans a long period. She, just to cut a long story short, she worked in many African countries, ended up becoming a Namibian citizen, where she ended up working in kind of policy in Namibia, and she passed away prematurely in 2006 and at that point, for reasons that you can imagine politically at that time, she said she never wanted to go back to what was then Serbia or Yugoslavia, or forget when the name was changed, but she did not want to go back. So her materials were left in our house in Belgrade. And so my decision was not even a decision. It felt like a necessity because I grew up with these materials. She was working day and night, writing, bringing papers, reading books, so, really, really active. So her room was left intact. And I didn't want this to go to waste. I didn't want it to disappear. We no longer have access to the house. So my mother and I decided to rescue this archive or these materials. So this is a journey of personal materials of somebody who's no longer there. So you have the ethical problem or the ethical question of how public does it ever become? Should it become? Would she have wanted that? Would she feel good about that? Or is this just like any of us, if suddenly our materials are in a room and we're no longer there, do we want this to become public or not? So that's the main kind of ethical issue. So what we did is we basically packaged it all up, and it's now in about 7 or 8 boxes, archive boxes. Traveled with me to different universities for many years. For emotional reasons, I wasn't able to engage with it. I wasn't even able to open it. And then eventually, through the conversations with the Museum of African Art in Belgrade and the wonderful curators there, this became a possibility. And I sort of started working through the archive. Now, the question is, the archive is in London at Chelsea, which does have a lot of connections with these kind of histories. It's literally in the same building as the Stuart Hall Archive, which is managed and organized by an organization called INIVA. It's also in the same building as the Research Center for Transnational Art, Identity and Nation, called TRAIN. So you would think that there would be like some kind of a collection of shared interests. But the reality of the neoliberal university is that we don't talk. We don't have the possibility to find the time to organize, to do things together, to share these interests. So the reality is that I am working with the archive in a very kind of grassroots and simple way. So the archive is available to the students on the course that I am course leader for. And when I can, and in collaboration with colleagues, I've tried to do several things. And those things are, so this has been happening for, let's say, 5 years. I've organized it a little bit, and there is a process of cataloging. So creating a sort of top level database so that people can find out what is in there, just have a bit of a sense of what's in the archive. Secondly, we're creating a working group. So my original idea was that because I'm not an online movement specialist, I grew up with it. I learned through experience as much as, one would living in a household like mine, and also having an active interest, but this isn't my professional, this isn't the focus of my research. So I thought I would bring together cultural workers and curators to work as a kind of working group over the years. We tried this, and my idea was to do deep readings of the archive. So rather than trying to create some kind of huge and comprehensive document, to really engage to understand what's in there. And it's important to say that the archive is really multifaceted. It has personal communication, which, for example, the title of this event comes from a personal correspondence between my aunt and an editor of a journal. So this kind of personal communication to United Nations reports, to huge amounts of information about, for example, a conference in Vienna on Namibian independence. So there's dozens of documents like that. So it's really in depth, but it's very varied. There's postcards, there's letters. So, what do you do with this? So my decision was then to open it up to my students. So now for 2 years, we work in what we call curatorial labs. I mean, in a way, it's a strange but very kind of positive connection. These young curators who are working, curating and collections. So it's actually a perfect opportunity for young curators to find out about how to work in this way. But of course, what we find is that these are scholars who have come because they're interested in an online movement. They've come to learn about how to work with collections and archives. So there's a really huge learning curve in that. And as I mentioned, really from nothing, people not knowing anything about this. So we work in these labs and they create small exhibitions. So the database, work with students, then the working group, and it has the archive in its various forms has kind of traveled and been shown in various exhibitions in different kind of formats, along with some discursive elements, conversations, and these working group meetings. And then we've managed to commission an artist, Darinka Matić, as part of the last October Salon, which is where this conversation also began a little bit. And she created an installation based around the archive. So these are very much a kind of just scratching the surface of what's in the archive. Of course, the other way, which I have not managed, would be to put in for a substantial research grant for this archive to really become kind of institutionalized. But I am reluctant to do that for a number of reasons, one of them being time. But apart from that, it is a personal archive, and I do have these ethical questions. And also, I would need to understand what the goals are. I mean, my idea was to partner up with an institution that would be genuinely interested in these materials, but I have not found such an institution. I don't know where this archive would fit well. So for now, the archive is absolutely fascinating, and there's so much there. Petra has been there, she has seen it, we've had conversations. There's so much potential, but there isn't time. And I don't know that the context that I'm in at Chelsea right now, in a very busy kind of teaching position, I don't know that much can be done. I won't go on. I think it's very important, and I think it's an excellent case study, and it could really open up possibilities for researchers, for artists, for curators. But again, to respond to the question, what are the problems? The challenges are that, and also I don't know in the British context kind of how to position it. It's very difficult to position it in a way to kind of really give it space, give it the possibility that it needs. The opportunities are there, but I think for now all we can do are these small discrete initiatives. They're very small and very intense, these labs. But I feel like right now that's because there's so much material there. It's really fascinating material. So this is all we're managing right now.
Thank you, Lina. And it really leads us somehow from this institution, how actually goes to the person, and then everything just disappeared. Yeah, like not disappearing, not disappear totally, but actually it's literally comes to the human. Yeah, so the human has a human nature and a human face, which also and these ethical questions, which can also Petra could add things. Actually, Petra is basically building a kind of archive, and basically we're probably questioning the what archive is in a general sense, not mentioning some theoretical positions about it, but definitely I think Petra could add to this fragility of the personal lives in different times, but also in these heavy moments we live. How you approach this the diachronities between past and present through personal contact and personal research with people, since you are researching the communities and trying to start from the scratch, and also connecting with the contemporary issues and moments, and also threads that we are still connected with the global South. So maybe you can add since you mentioned at the beginning, how it's when you start from nothingness, how it is.
Thank you so much. Yeah, well, I did not start from nothingness. I started from a small trace that I found in Večernji List Croatian newspaper from 1984, which mentioned African Student Union, which led me to a national archive of the Bulletin Solidarnost, which was published by the International Student Friendship Club in Zagreb from 1966 until the end of the 80s. And this has been my main learning material. The bulletin started really as a club bulletin. So in the first years, well, actually the second year, because the first year I have not found neither in Croatia or Serbia. It is really a student bulletin. Who graduated? Who is the first student from Ethiopia to be in Croatia? Who left for holidays? What the students were doing, football and things like this. So very beautiful, and a lot of private data, basically, a lot of names, which helped me to map the names and fit them into boxes for countries. And this is the base of my knowledge. And then for years, I have been trying to talk about this and also research, of course, and asking absolutely everybody, do you know anything? Do you know anybody? And then, so back to Solidarnost. So in Solidarnost, what became apparent was that only in Zagreb, we had over 40 student organizations, national and supranational. So there was the African Student Union, Arab Student Union, and Latin American and Iberian Student Union, but also many, many national ones. And I was very interested in their cultural and political work. And my first issue, when I started to read these informations that were published in Solidarnost, was that, like, I don't know anything about those countries. I don't even know anything about the country I was born in, which was Yugoslavia. And not to mention African and Asian countries. Like, I'm not a historian, I'm a museologist. And even if I was, like, it's not easy to approach and to kind of find the confidence to even start researching, because you're probably going to be wrong 99% of the time. You're going to have assumptions. But with time, actually, what was kind of a trigger for everything was that I invited a Kurdish artist, Bahzat Suleiman, to come to Croatia and try to research a little bit of the history of Kurdish students in Croatia. And also we did a series of dancing workshops around Croatia, especially which we're most proud of, on the Croatian-Serbian border in a Serbian village for Croatian National Day, which was a very, very beautiful event. But then, and my idea was kind of like, let's use this archive to reestablish links to different Asian countries, African countries, American countries. But what became emergent in this idea and this work, and I do have a big network that I am working with and talking about this, was that the archive has to be preserved somehow. And it has to be communicated somehow to the outside. And in the beginning, I thought, oh, great. So, I have this material from, let's say, Ethiopia. Well, let's say Somalia. There must be Somali researchers who are looking for this. But from Croatia, this was very difficult to find. I would approach my Syrian friends and say, are you interested in the Syrian history of Croatia? And they would say, no, I absolutely am not. I had to come to Croatia because of the war in my country. And here I am with my uncles and my family who moved here and who kept the connections to Assad government that I had to run away from. I don't really care about the history of Syrian students in Croatia. So, like, it was kind of like I'm lost in this. On the other hand, I have all of these PhD students reaching out to me. They want the archive, they want the knowledge. But on the other hand, the people that I want to share it with, I cannot reach to. And then came the idea of a community archive. I have been working in a community museum with Blok, a neighborhood museum Trešnjevka, and the idea to actually find materials, get consent to publish them, and get them out. Also at this time, I started to make film as well. So to publish the interviews that I'm doing. And yeah, so the challenges that we have right now with the archive. So I commissioned my friends and colleagues who all kind of come out of non-aligned stories. They have connections to different countries. And they are kind of going into their family histories, community histories. The problem that we have right now is that because my database kind of starts from students. I'm interested in the people that I can connect to, who I might have been studying with if I was in Zagreb in 1968, or who is maybe an uncle or grandparents of my friends. They are extremely intimate. extremely, extremely intimate. And for this reason, the research is extremely slow. And we try to, and this is quite hard when you are self-funded as an activist archive, we try to be very, very gentle. So for example, recently our researcher who is working with Colombia did a huge amount of research. We got the consent, we published it, and then the person said they are not comfortable with it. So we take it down, and that's fine. But it's kind of hard to promote the project when you are not publishing things, right? And you don't have institutions backing you. So this is one issue that we are thinking about, but it's definitely not stopping us, because immediately we understood that, especially, the 90s have been so hard, and they have affected absolutely everybody who found themselves in Croatia from Croatia, but also from different countries, that there would be very, very hard stories. So we are also interested to be a private archive. There are private archives. There are LGBT archives that are only accessible to LGBT people through different events, and we are happy to preserve this, although trust building is going to take time.
Thank you. So thank you all for actually presenting your research in these very details. So what I can find is a thread between different archives you presented. There is always this personal question, whether it is actually personal archive or it's just a person who does the not only curating but taking care of the heritage of the archive on one hand, and also these problems that one faces with entering institutional archives, is like institutional knowledge or something that is preserved. So regarding the non-aligned, the knowledge about non-aligned, my question would be, in your practices and in your experiences, how do you actually see the not only possibility, but let's say, what would be, in your opinion, the way in actually regarding and actually preserving and opening this knowledge? Because the thing with the archive, whether if it's personal or not, or institutional, there is always this heaviness to enter it, to deal with it, and then to open it further. But if we don't have this presumption, or if we don't work on this as not only as a possibility, but actually as an achievement, then the question would be how we preserve the knowledge and how we share the knowledge at all. I mean, all your projects are great, but as you already said, and something that we also experience, there is no wider visibility of it. So sometimes this is a good thing, I would say, but sometimes is needed to be accessible. So either in your personal or like everyday life, sharing this knowledge, or like the idea of building maybe something that would be a greater infrastructure that non-aligned countries had, was great, because in many countries it was supported from above, I would say. We don't have this possibility anymore. Nation, countries, states, and national driven societies are actually not interested in this knowledge at all. So it's again, a personal thing, even if it's sometimes institutionally supported. There is problems with always with how institutionally supported it is. But my question would be then how do you see the future and possibilities of what you have, and how can it be developed or advanced further? Or maybe you actually think that this is not needed at all. Lina, yeah, let's open with you.
Yes, it's a really difficult question, and it's something that I revisit all the time. And depending on where I am, how I'm feeling, and what is happening, who I'm talking to, I have kind of different answers to this. Sometimes I think the energy it would take to, as I said, put a bid for a major research project is that I don't have that energy, that I don't think I can manage that, because as we know, applying for big research projects is A, incredibly time consuming, B, a set of skills that are not necessarily what I may have. Like, it's a very specific way of going about things. And as much as I am in academia, I'm kind of a little bit more on the kind of running courses side than the research side. And then thirdly, this question of interest, like, is it worth trying to create something around an archive in this moment, in this country, in this institution? And that I'm not so sure about. I think the value, personally, I think the value of the archive that I'm the custodian for, self-appointed custodian, is enormous. I get so much from it. I mean, when we first started, my partner and I had this very happy summer a couple of years ago, going through it and kind of cataloging, and it was amazing. It was like being in a different time, a different world, full of optimism. It was just amazing. But maybe that's all it can be. Like, I don't know that can be shared. And my fear is getting bogged down with the bureaucracy and the administration of a huge research grant, and then never actually engaging with this material properly. So, in other words, I'm undecided, and maybe it's just something that, when I'm retired, maybe I'll just sit there and read all these papers and then start writing something about it, or continue to work with students. I'm a little bit reluctant to enter into to institutionalize it more. I am nervous about that. But I think there is a need. I think, as I said, there is this niche interest. What to do, where to go, I currently don't have an answer. Sorry, I'm gonna answer maybe a creative Euro project. Yeah, we're in the UK. We can't do that anymore. It would have been, but Brexit.
Thank you. Goran, maybe you can actually continue in regards to this possibility of institutionalized support, which actually your project is built in this context. But do you think and do you believe that this could be possibility for gaining wider audience, I would say, like not audience, but like people who would actually access this knowledge? Or it's good that it is supported at least, but it still stays in the institution? Because as I said, I realized and we realized through our work as well, that we cannot speak about general or ideological support of this kind of knowledge. We are coming from below, but still we fight for, spreading the word.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So as you mentioned, Isidora, my research on Yugoslav-Zambian relations is embedded in a academic institutional setup. It is financed by the Austrian State Agency for Scientific Funding, the FWF fund. And this, enables my research team, to definitely do many of the things that Lina was mentioning. So to afford going abroad, doing archival research, field work in Zambia, for instance, building up our project archive, getting support for publishing and so on. But again, even at this level, there are clear limitations to this. So the projects of this type last typically 3 to 4 years maximum. There are no guarantees that you will be afforded or enabled to continue working on this. So we are now reaching the end of the project, and we have this paradoxical problem that we have actually an abundance of materials that are unused that we could potentially organize and use for a next project. However, in the neoliberal academia of today, nothing is taken for granted. So this means applying for another project, going to the academic labor market, and kind of making your pitch and so on. So there is this institutional limit. There is a clear limit of doing research and publishing in an academic setting. So, for instance, our archive is bounded by data management obligations of the University of Vienna or different EU regulations. So we are very much, it is our duty to keep them under a lock, so to say. And when we publish, there are very close scrutiny of the way to go about this for a reason. But on the other hand, it is not a kind of a popular science or a grassroots project that many of us aspire for or wish that more of them exist, right? So I would say one way to move forward is to politicize our work. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by politicization? I mean making this heritage, these topics connected to actual present day concerns of people, right? As I mentioned in the beginning, in the former Yugoslav space, these memories live through family, they are passed on to next generations. There are numerous people from these interactions who still live, mixed marriages, people who came and studied, and so on. However, they are clearly depoliticized in a way that they are. Well, similar to the notion of Yugo nostalgia in a way. They do have this counter-hegemonic potency of saying there were different things back then. Saying you disagree with certain currents in your society, in your country today, but still they are clearly deregulated to something in the past, a project which existed and which quote unquote failed, right? So, and there are many really obvious things that you can do to make these historical topics and these experiences relevant today. Some of my colleagues, for instance, have been questioning of how does the so-called refugee migrant crisis, European migrant crisis of 2015, with these streams of people moving from the Middle East towards these Balkan routes, do these, for instance, non-aligned connections and memories, do they play a role in the way that people perceive refugees from these countries, right? Today, one of the major topics in our societies is the globalization of the workforce. I know in Croatia, this is a big topic for years already, especially in the tourist sector, but also beyond that. In Serbia as well, in recent years, I mean, you can see more and more people from the global south working in Serbia in various industries. And I've just seen today there was really an interesting kind of a screenshot that I received from a friend over Facebook, and it was a kind of a he was watching a kind of extreme right-wing Facebook group, which is trying to kind of spread hate and kind of agitate people against these foreign workers in Serbia today. And they're actually complaining that their job is not that easy because it is not enough for them to put a label on somebody as an Arab or an African or coming from this country, because often the connotations are, oh yes, sure, but these are non-aligned partners. So, what's the problem? So these bigots, these right-wing ideologists were complaining among themselves that they have to put in more effort to kind of make the public more sensitive to their message. So these are just some of the points that I'm eager to connect my research, and I think we could all connect to.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning this. I think both Boško and I really agree with this notion of politicize as a possibility to actually make the idea of non-aligned movement alive today. Not only, I would say, regarding the workflow, but definitely because of certain neocolonial processes that our societies actually facing. And this was the main reason that we actually developed this project, in order to question the experiences of non-aligned movement and struggles of liberation that global majority went through and Yugoslavia supported. And this, not paradoxical, but this reality check that we are facing at the peripheries, that we are actually at the periphery of Europe are facing the very same processes now. Yes, Petra, maybe this is also the question for you, although you mentioned these hardship notions about developing archives and preserving knowledge actually without any kind of support. But would you advance this process, as you said, or maybe you have ideas for doing it in a different way, maybe?
I have a lot of ideas. Since I have been doing this for years, I'm always in the question: should I take the academic path or not? And have a lot of conversations about this. And something I have been hearing recently more and more, as I'm sure that pretty much everyone in the room is familiar with. Usually, when you mention the non-aligned movement, first you have to explain what you mean. And one thing that I have been hearing more and more is like, I don't need a PhD, or maybe Lina does not need a research project. We need an institute. Like, we need a serious institute, because we are not only talking okay, so we are talking about Yugoslavia, a country that doesn't exist anymore. We are talking about diasporas, but we are talking about the history of international solidarity, and we are talking about history of global diasporas, which is extremely important. And the fact that an institute doesn't exist is blocking all of us in our work. So this is something that I would say first. The second thing is, as we started our work with artists, this is something for me that is an extreme potential, because, history only matters when you apply it to the present. So I'm very, very interested to work with artists, with artist collectives, with different institutions, research institutions from all over the world on our common heritage, because I think it's very, very beautiful. I want to work with Palestine and say, okay, half of the doctors in Gaza hospital were students of the University of Zagreb. They all speak Croatian. Let's talk about how they cannot enter Croatia. How Palestinian persons, Palestinian families cannot even enter the Republic of Croatia, the place they spend time in. We have Palestinians who fought on Croatian side in the 90s war, and still their families cannot enter the country. So there is many, many, many relevant topics. There is so many, I always say it's so many PhDs. So back to the Institute, yeah, but also with the artists. I think artists are professionals in making new ideas. So this is a beautiful, beautiful field to open up many different ideas and collaborations following the non-aligned principle. And another thing that I want to say, so recently we had a public opening of the non-aligned archive. And what was the most interesting part for us was an online discussion like this, because people could join all over the world. And this is what we want to continue. And especially, we live in such politically charged times. I really want to see people in the same room who are fighting on the streets in Serbia, who are fighting in the streets of Indonesia, young people who are organizing through Discord from Nepal. I want to talk to people from Congo. I want to talk to people from Palestine at the same time. And this is what the non-aligned showed us it could be done in an analog way. And I think we have all the tools that are possible to do it today.
Thank you, Petra. I couldn't agree more. This was also the idea. Thank you, actually, all. I would open the floor for questions. We have some in the chat that we collected. Some of you already answered, but I will just go through them quickly. Also, if anyone want to join, just raise your hand, this Zoom hand, and we will let you speak. There is this question at the beginning. I will just read you. So maybe Lina, Petra, and Goran, if you want to add about, please do. So Jelena Sofronijević said, thank you all so much for your contribution. I'm particularly interested in the different ideas about the nation, whether historical revisionism during the Yugoslav wars or the entering of international histories through national archives. I wonder if any of the speakers wanted to advance some of the discussions around the relationships between nationalism and internationalism with respect to the national identity in socialist Yugoslavia. How important was a non-aligned movement to individualists and communities' identities as Yugoslavs? I use plural as what it was to be Yugoslav meant different things to different people, if it meant anything at all. I don't know if you have anything to say or add. From what we have actually experienced in our artistic research dealing with the mostly archives of moving images in the period of non-aligned movement, and so is that anti-colonial struggle, and this sometimes seen as a paradox, anti-colonial struggles were actually regarded as gaining the nationalist state and forming the nationalist states. But after colonial period. So it was actually very important for many of the societies in the global south or global majority. In Yugoslavia, I don't know, we as someone who was born in Yugoslavia and was Yugoslav, we were regarded as Yugoslav identity without plural. So I wouldn't know what different notions of or regarding Yugoslav would mean. It was just the idea based on the brotherhood and unity and gathering, yes, six nations, but under the roof of Yugoslavia. And yeah, I don't know if you have any comment, you can.
Goran raised the hand. Maybe he wants to answer this issue.
Yes, maybe a short reflection on this question of interplay between Yugoslav and national identities within Yugoslavia and non-alignment or Yugoslav internationalism. I would say that they were really intertwined. If you look at it deep on deeper level, the reasons for Yugoslav international mission were internal as much as they were global or solidaric in terms of global South. I mentioned in the beginning the rise of the idea of a return to Europe in the 1980s in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe especially. And this was a matter of discussions within the Yugoslav political elite already before that. So the more northwestern republics, such as Slovenia and Croatia, which were closer to Western Europe or had more established connections economically, culturally, there was a fraction within the Communist Party of these republics which were putting into question early on Yugoslavia's emphasis on developing countries and going towards Asia and Africa instead towards Europe via Central Europe. So this was not a kind of a easy plebiscite within Yugoslav communists. And one of the reasons why the elite actors, the kind of old partisan generation, insisted on this when it comes to internal matters, is exactly keeping the Yugoslav cohesion, because you had first crisis and doubts about the Yugoslav modernization project already in the mid 1960s. The first signs that things are not as successful or smooth as they should be. So proving the successfulness of the Yugoslav model or competence of Yugoslav experts, companies abroad in the global South kind of kept confidence of also Yugoslavs in internal matters as well. So it had this importance as well of Yugoslav cohesion without doubt. Yeah.
Thank you, Goran.
Yeah, if I can just,
Lina.
I think this is a very complex question with many layers, but on a very personal level, I think the non-aligned movement, for me at least, and maybe my generation or generations around mine, I think it felt very central. It was something that felt very central to the identity of being Yugoslav. So when you traveled, this sense of, coming from a country that was part of such a movement was really significant. And even to this day, when we meet people from other countries that were involved in the non-aligned movement, there is a certain allegiance, certain solidarity, a certain shared understanding. For me, I think this is the most important thing that lives on. In archives, yes, papers, materials, yes, but it's this sense, it's almost difficult to put a finger on it, but this sense of possibility, that this is possible, we've seen it, we've experienced it. It really happened, and it was powerful and significant. But I keep thinking, as we're talking about, what would it be today? What is it today? I keep thinking about the flotilla. I keep thinking that that is the spirit of non-alignment. All these activists, people coming together in a very simple way, very practical way, saying, I can do something, something can be done with what we have. And that, like, to me, that's the best example of the spirit of the non-aligned movement. A young girl from Sweden and some activists coming together and attempting to do something with very little. And to me, that is really, it gives me, of course, a lot of hope, as difficult as it is.
Thank you. Yeah, we had more questions and suggestions from Stephanie regarding, Lina, your question about the institutionalizing the archive. I think you actually read about this and answered. There is also some links. But there was also another question from Natasha Catalina about the suggestion of books. The main question, actually, consequences of the movement in the present day. We also at the project Instagram page, we shared Lina's, Petra's, and Goran's ideas and suggestions of books who can develop more and advance knowledge on non-aligned movement. So Natasha, I would invite you to look, but also Lina and Goran shared links. They're online as well. There is a question by Elena. So I would like to hear a little more from the speakers, as somebody from one of the smaller countries belong to a non-aligned movement, Cyprus, whether despite the scattered archives, what are the solidarity practice that we learn from these archives and how we can use them in very needed solidarity projects worldwide. So basically, if we move away from the state level, can some of the solidarities can inform contemporary activist projects? Yeah, Lina, the acronym is NAMS, a Non-Aligned Movement Solidarity Archive. So if any of you want to answer to Elena's, any ideas?
Yeah, I can talk. Yeah, knowing what I know about the students' activities back in the day, so 1960s Zagreb was a place where the students were teaching Swahili, where they were teaching Arabic. This is something that we rarely do nowadays. We are mostly trying to integrate people because we don't even get the resources from the states to do that. I don't know how it is in Serbia, but in Croatia, there is no free Croatian language, even if you become a citizen. In the 60s, we were watching films from Congo, and we had an Indonesian band. And one of the strategies was partying, I must say. One of the strategies was partying. The other strategy was political debates and political discussion. It was the International Student Club of Friendship, which basically made the first forum in Zagreb, where every week they would have an important guest, some journalist or politician or whoever, and the whole town would be there to discuss with this person, to develop their own political ideas. I think that today the culture of political discussion, real-time, analog one, is quite dead. So this is something that we can revive for sure. yeah, like these are the things that are on top of my mind. I will also like to mention that, for example, especially when we are talking about the 1960s, one thing that united pretty much all of the students that were in Zagreb, all the international students with the local students, was solidarity with Vietnam. So, there are documents of Arab students collecting blood for Vietnamese soldiers, and the blood is coming from the workers of the Zagreb milk factory. So, there was a lot of communication to all the government institutions. There are documents of Kurdish students coming to universities to teach about Kurdish culture and history. It was an active knowledge exchange, which wasn't only to integrate the new people into the environment, but also to learn from our respected guests and to kind of enrich our culture. So I would say that most of these ideas are things we can do today, while being quite aware of the class privileges that came with the non-aligned movement and the way that people come to Europe nowadays in much more precarious ways, with very different statuses, without visas, seeking asylum as migrant workers. So it's hard. I would say, if it was Yugoslavia that kind of helped Zagreb students organize a Swahili course, we should not expect that if, in the town of Zagreb, we only have a few Swahili speakers who are most likely to be people with refugee status or asylum seekers. This is not something that is in the capacity of a person who has that kind of status. But we can work towards something similar. I think we can experiment with different forms.
I would just like to add to this. I mean, I think it's a very good question. What can we learn and what can we take forward? But I think it's also important to update it in relation to the tools and the methods that we have to connect today. If the non-aligned movement had had the technological tools that we have today, it would have just looked different. So I think, of course, the technological tools are very much in the hands of global corporations, so that's very problematic. So it's not like it's all perfect and free flowing and secure. But I think it's important to take what we learn, look at what we had. So, for example, the bulletins in the archive that we work with are really informative, interesting. The ways in which information is shared, the ways methods and tactics are shared, updating information. I mean, this production of these bulletins is really inspiring. But of course, today that would take a different form. So I think it's important to kind of take the learning and then almost park it and think, well, what does that mean today? How do we use the tools that we have without completely being at the service of, we're using Instagram and it's very effective, but also what are we losing by using Instagram? So I think to critically engage with technology with the underlying knowledge of the non-aligned movements methods. That would be kind of the challenge, I think, for us going forward.
And possibly developing the methodology of spreading. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. As I can see, there's no more questions from, yeah, there's no more questions. And I think no one raised a hand. It was just chat. If you don't have, it's Goran raised a hand. Please.
I hope you don't mind. I will just add shortly
Of course.
my 2 cents
Yeah.
on this, because I was really inspired by things that Lina and Petra said. And as a matter of fact, of things that they are doing, because they are actually, Lina kind of more privately, but also with an intent to discuss this and do something with it potentially. And Petra with her, the idea of a counter archive. I think first of all, things are really different. They're structurally different in the sense that if we look at the moment of non-alignment of 60s, 70s, we see institutional backup in the sense that we are dealing with states which tend to be counter-hegemonic and want to establish relations, right? So there is funding, there are channels, things are easier. Still, from my research, I think what we could maybe relate to easier today is the exchange happening in the colonial times, because the NAM networks were not only between sovereign states, but also, for instance, in the case of Zambia, networks go back to late 1950s when Zambia was still North Rhodesia and a British colony, right? And you can see there how important agency is and how important ideas are. So it took the first Zambians who visited Yugoslavia in 1959 3 months to come to Yugoslavia. So a similar kind of way that the present day refugees would go to reach Croatia or Serbia or Western Europe, because they wouldn't be issued visas for something like this. They had to go around different friendly and unfriendly states in Africa. They had to improvise. They didn't have the funds. But once they managed to go to Yugoslavia, once they had this experience, they went back with many, ideas, and they were energized by this experience. So what I'm trying to say is how important is really individual agency despite the structural obstacles, and ideas. Ideas, there is a obvious presence of kind of thirst for counter-hegemonic projects today, right? I think it was Lina or Petra who mentioned Gaza. I mean, Gaza is the Vietnam of our days. This is clear, right? So if we try to do something, speak out, organize, and connect to these ideas or even affectionate, moments and realms which people are searching for answers and debates, we can move things. I have no doubt about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. This is what we said at the beginning. The contemporary situation looks like there is a division, and that we are actually facing again this block division, but that's actually not true. It's only the mimicry of today's situation. And as you Goran said, I really like this. It's more similar to colonial context than to non-aligned context, because none of today's nation states and societies would actually support this idea of non-aligned movement. And maybe this is actually the reason why the knowledge of and about non-aligned movement is not only erased in societies that were actually part of non-aligned movement before, but is actually not spread, and there is no support. And it's up to individuals, but also collectives and groups, to start rethinking these connections and possibilities of building solidarity platform of today. Thank you all very much.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, yes. I'm not as polite as Goran to raise my digital hand. I'm rude and interrupting. I wanted to ask you, Doppelganger, I'm very curious about how you've created something significant with this project. So I would like, if you don't mind, if you can say a little bit about how you plan to continue it beyond this event in Vienna, and what the future of this, because this in itself is a very good start. It's a good platform. So I'm very curious.
Thank you, Lina. Well, the idea, although I completely agree that social media and Instagram is not the place of it, but we started with this project as actually building a platform and building a kind of an archive that could be revised or looked at. And this is why in the last couple of months we are building the content together with all of you. And these discussions and the exhibition is part of it. We actually wanted to spark the discussion about personally what's going on in Serbia, and the not only the protests that we've been having for 11 months, but before that, the idea of lithium that Serbian society is facing and protesting, but nevertheless, Serbia is actually a new place for the mining. The idea of the whole project was actually that to see how we can connect various actors and people with whom we collaborate and try to find certain solutions and possibilities of acting together in the future. So since we work with archival moving images, this visibility and notion of visibility of certain issues is very important for us, but also knowledge. And this is why we started with building the platform and bringing, for example, this exhibition that actually articulates issues at the peripheries of Europe, not only in Serbia, but as we say, something very strange and bad is going on in Georgia, in Romania, in Spain, and no one is actually paying attention. So the idea is to unite the struggles and see how we can develop methodologies and tools for fighting this situation. It was very important for us to raise these questions at the global north. So Vienna is a part of, and used to be Imperial core, is very much global north. But the idea is to go further and to develop this in the other contexts.
Yes, I think the complexity of situation generally, but also our situation living in Serbia, Balkans general, really brings this a big question of anti-colonial struggle. So because we are really definitely going backwards in imperialist times, so looking for any kind of common ground for discussion and fight. And recently I just read the text of Olja Džuverović published in one panel. It was in 80s, of course, done in Yugoslavia. She's analyzing the fights through Africa from Lumumba time, from the first socialist independence and the Nkrumah, and then analyzing differently how it goes to more leaving the socialism or state socialism in a way towards more Christian, let's say, adaptation, which is more Cabral, for example, and then towards the national democracy, which is SWAPO and of course Mandela. And then actually she's saying, asking herself where it's going, and this is also an interesting question towards this democratic nationalism. So she basically mapped all the ideologies that still exist in a way, and concluding the text that only fight will tell, like quoting some ZANU saying of ZANU movement in Zimbabwe. So I think that this ideological fight, first of all, we are witnessing every day, need a kind of clearance, what we are positioned, what we are fighting for, since constantly we are faced with this fog of I don't know, liberal fog, I would say, mostly. So for us, it's mostly very, very radical left, and we need a kind of confrontation with any kind of ideologema, I would say, that consists. So for us, even non-alignment movement, but not non-alignment movement itself, but how it developed as a concept in 20 years, we always want a kind of clearance. So that clearance that we can literally know or the premises of it, but what are all the revisionisms that happened, and how we still read it like in all history, and also you can read it like our experience. We don't know if it's true, but someone mentioned national identities in Balkans, but at the end of 80s, someone could say that part of anti-colonial struggle could be a national liberation of Balkan people, of what, I don't know, of Yugoslav identity, you know? It's a kind of turnover in the 80s. So this kind of, I wouldn't say manipulations, but no, ideologema. So this kind of nonsenses and the blindness is something that we are fighting actually at the first stance. And then, of course, I think it's much easier then to find the common ground for solidarity.
Yeah, I think this is so important that you bring a specific text. And I think that's the struggle to get to that level, to really engage with ideas. Because I think or at least what I find, is that we are engaging with like this body of work, these archives, but that's, when I tried with the working group, we were reading like just one document. In a meeting, each of us would take one document and learn something from it, because we all arrive at it saying we know very little. And then document by document, we start to break it down to understand what's actually in the archive. But this needs time. This is where we need Petra's Institute. We need this for this kind of work, and to actually engage with the material. That's the where we should be going.
Yeah. Okay, then institute. We should head towards that. Yeah, definitely. It's a fight on various levels. Thank you all for sharing your experience. We have a really another layer of food for thought and possibilities. As I said, we are opening all of this as a kind of knowledge that is put on the platform and could be accessible. For now, it's on social media and websites, but it's a start. Yes, thanks, and hopefully see you also on Wednesday, when we will have another discussion that will articulate and question these concrete neo-colonial processes that our society in Serbia, but also, as I said, other societies are faced, and how we actually, and what should we do with that. Thank you, and yeah, good night.
Thank you, and see you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks.
See ya.
Bye bye.
Bye.